The thing about betrayal is that it never announces itself. It doesn't knock on your door wearing a name tag that says, "Hi, I'm here to destroy your life." It seeps in through the cracks you didn't know existed, pooling in the corners of your perfect suburban existence until one day you're drowning in it, wondering how you didn't notice the water rising. My name is Richard Hayes, and until 4 months ago, I would have told you I had everything figured out. 44 years old, regional sales manager for Midwest Industrial Supply, owner of a colonial in Carmel's best neighborhood, married to my college sweetheart for 22 years. The American dream, wrapped up with a bow and a two-car garage. I met Carol at Indiana University in the spring of 2001. She was sitting in the Memorial Union, highlighting a psychology textbook with such intensity that she didn't notice she'd gone through the paper on 3 consecutive pages. When I pointed this out, she looked up with these green eyes that seemed to see right through my sophomore bravado and said, "Maybe I just really wanted those points to sink in." That was Carol. Sharp, funny, beautiful, in that natural way that made other women try too hard. She was from Muncie, daughter of a hardware store owner and a school nurse. I was from Kokomo, son of an insurance adjuster and a secretary. We were both first-generation college students, both hungry for something more than our parents' careful, limited lives. Our first date was at Nick's English Hut, the campus dive bar where generations of Hoosiers had fallen in love over cheap beer and grease-soaked fries. She ordered a burger, ate it without pretending she wasn't hungry, and destroyed me in 3 games of pool. When I walked her back to her dorm, she said, "I don't kiss on first dates, but I might make an exception if you admit I'm better at pool." "You're better at pool," I said immediately. "That was too easy," she laughed. "I'll have to work on making you work for things." She kissed me anyway, quick and soft, then disappeared into Reed Hall before I could respond. I stood there like an idiot for 5 minutes, grinning at the door, already planning our next date. We were inseparable after that. Study sessions that turned into makeout sessions. Basketball games where we paid more attention to each other than the court. Spring breaks driving to Florida in my dying Honda Civic, sleeping in the car to save money, eating gas station sandwiches, and feeling like millionaires because we had each other. Junior year, I knew I was going to marry her. Senior year, I proposed at the sample gates, the limestone arches that every IU student walks through at graduation. She said yes before I even finished asking, both of us crying, a tour group of prospective students applauding like we'd choreographed it for their benefit. We were married 3 years later at St. Luke's Methodist, the reception at Kokomo Country Club that my parents saved for 2 years to afford. Dad pulled me aside during the father-son dance. We'd chosen Simple Man by Leonard Skynyrd because we weren't fancy people, and said, "Richard, you build a marriage like you build a house, one brick at a time, on solid ground, with someone who shares your blueprint." He'd been married to Mom for 31 years at that point. They'd die together 5 years later, car accident on I-65, holding hands when the paramedics found them. Even in death, they were a team. That's what I thought Carol and I would be. Our life unfolded like a strategic business plan. Carol took a job at Fifth Third Bank while I started as a sales rep at Midwest Industrial. We bought a starter home in Speedway, a 2-bedroom ranch with avocado appliances and orange shag carpet that we spent every weekend for 6 months ripping out. We'd work all day, order Chinese food, eat it sitting on the floor surrounded by renovation debris, and plan our future. 3 kids, Carol would say, ticking off on her fingers. First one by 30. 2 kids, I'd counter, but we can negotiate on the third if the first 2 don't bankrupt us. Deal. But I want the house in Carmel by the time they're school age. Carmel's expensive. Then you better get promoted, mister. She said it teasingly, but there was steel underneath. Carol had grown up watching her mother clip coupons and buy generic everything. She wanted name brands, good schools, the kind of life where you didn't check your bank balance before grocery shopping. I wanted to give that to her. God, I wanted to give her everything. Ashley came along right on schedule, born 2 weeks before Carol's 30th birthday. The pregnancy was brutal. Morning sickness that lasted all day, preeclampsia that had her on bed rest for the last 2 months. I'd come home from work to find her crying from frustration. This ambitious woman trapped in a body that had betrayed her. "I hate this," she said one night, 8 months pregnant. I hate being helpless. You're not helpless, I said. You're building a human. That's the opposite of helpless. You always know what to say, she murmured, then winced as Ashley kicked. Your daughter's trying to escape through my ribs. My daughter when she's violent? Your daughter when she's sweet? Exactly. Brandon came 2 years later, easier pregnancy, but colicky infant who didn't sleep through the night until he was 18 months old. We were zombies that entire time, passing each other in the hallway at 3 a.m., taking shifts walking him around the living room, singing the same lullabies until the words lost all meaning. But we were happy, exhausted, overwhelmed, constantly covered in various baby fluids, but happy. We had our family, our plan, our trajectory toward the life we'd mapped out on those speedway floors. The promotion came when Brandon was 3. Regional sales manager, 40% raise, company car. The same week, Carol made assistant manager at her bank branch. We celebrated at St. Elmo Steakhouse, spending more on one dinner than we used to spend on groceries for a month, and didn't feel guilty about it. We did it, Carol said, raising her glass of wine that cost more than our first date. We actually did it. We're not done yet, I said. This is just the beginning. She smiled, that same smile from Nick's English hut all those years ago. Then we better pace ourselves. The house on Sycamore Street came next. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, a kitchen with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. The sellers were divorcing, desperate to unload it, and we got it for $30,000 under asking. Carol cried when we got the keys, standing in the foyer with its soaring ceiling and chandelier that looked like it belonged in a magazine. My mom would die if she saw this, she said. So call her, show her. No, Carol said quietly. She'd find something wrong with it. Say we're getting above ourselves. Say it's too much house for 4 people. I understood. Both our families had a complicated relationship with our success. Proud but resentful, supportive but suspicious, like we'd betrayed them by wanting more than they'd had. The neighborhood was everything we'd dreamed about during those renovation weekends. Tree-lined streets with names like Sycamore, Maple, and Oak. Houses set back from the road with professional landscaping and invisible fence systems. The kind of place where kids could ride bikes until dark, and the biggest crime was someone forgetting to bring their trash cans in promptly. 8 houses on our stretch of Sycamore, each a variation on the colonial theme. The Petersons at 412 had been there the longest. Harold was a retired Eli Lilly executive, Margaret a former nurse. They kept to themselves mostly, their primary interaction with the neighborhood being Harold's meticulous lawn care that made the rest of us look like amateurs. The Brennans at 416 were the newest before us, young couple with twin toddlers who turned every neighborhood gathering into a cheerful chaos. Jennifer Brennan had that harried mom energy that involved apologizing constantly for her kids while secretly being proud of their spirited behavior. Tom Brennan worked for some tech startup downtown, always on his phone, always just about to close a huge deal. The social center of Sycamore Street was undeniably 420, the Anderson House. It was the largest on the street, 5 bedrooms with a pool out back and a 3-car garage that Frank had converted partially into what he called his man cave, but was really just a shrine to his University of Michigan days. Frank Anderson was impossible to miss. 6'3", former college football player who'd maintained just enough of his physique to be impressive, but gained just enough of a belly to be approachable. He owned 3 car dealerships across Indianapolis: Anderson Chevrolet, Anderson Honda, and Anderson Luxury Motors. His face beamed from billboards along every major highway, always with the tagline, Frank Anderson, dealing straight since '98. His wife Patricia was equally notable, but for different reasons. Former Miss Indiana 1998, she'd parlayed her crown into a brief stint as a local news anchor before marrying Frank and becoming a real estate agent. She still carried herself like she was on stage. Perfect posture, perfect makeup, perfect smile that never quite reached her eyes. Their daughters were what everyone expected from that genetic combination. Emma, 21, was at Butler studying pre-med, all her father's confidence and her mother's beauty. Sophia, 18, had just graduated from Carmel High and was headed to IU in the fall, my alma mater, though she'd probably experience it differently than Carol and I had with our gas station sandwiches and dying Honda. The Andersons threw legendary parties. 4th of July with professional fireworks that technically violated city ordinances, but no one complained about. Labor Day barbecues with enough food to feed half of Carmel. Halloween decorations that cost more than some people's mortgages. They were the unofficial social directors of Sycamore Street, and we all orbited around their gravitational pull. That's why Kyle's arrival was such an event. Frank had mentioned his brother occasionally, usually in the context of explaining why he had a "Support Our Troops" sticker on his Escalade, despite never serving himself. Kyle was 10 years younger, had joined the Army straight out of high school when Frank was already selling cars and building his empire. Kid always needed to prove himself, Frank said at one barbecue, beer number 4, making him philosophical. Growing up in my shadow, you know? I was all-state football. He was skinny Kyle who read books. Army made a man out of him, though. 3 tours in Afghanistan, can you believe it? Kid's a genuine hero. The hero came home in June, medical discharge after an IED scrambled something in his head. Not enough to disable him, Frank was quick to clarify. Just enough that the Army decided 3 tours was sufficient service. He was moving into Frank's finished basement temporarily, just until he figured out his next move. I remember the day he arrived like you remember where you were during historical moments. It was a Saturday, unseasonably hot for June in Indiana. Carol and I were in the backyard. She was planting tomatoes while I assembled a new grill, sweating through my shirt and regretting not hiring someone to do it. The moving truck pulled up next door, and Frank came out to direct traffic with the enthusiasm of a ground crew chief. Kyle emerged from a black Dodge Charger, and even from our yard I could see he was nothing like his brother. Where Frank was big and loud and took up space, Kyle was compact and quiet and seemed to absorb space around him. Maybe 5'10", built like a wrestler, all controlled power and economical movement. He had that particular stance military people never quite lose, weight balanced, ready to move in any direction, never quite relaxed even when standing still. "Should we go over?" Carol asked, standing up from her gardening, dirt on her knees. "Let them get settled," I said, struggling with a particularly stubborn bolt. "Frank'll bring him around soon enough." And he did, that very evening. We were eating dinner on the deck, grilled chicken from the new grill I'd finally conquered, when Frank's voice boomed over the fence. "Hayes family! Got someone I want you to meet." They came through the gate, Frank leading Kyle like a prize he'd won. Up close, Kyle was more interesting than handsome. Sharp features, dark hair, cut military short, eyes the color of winter sky. He had a scar through his left eyebrow that made him look like a villain in an action movie, but his smile was surprisingly gentle. "Kyle Anderson," he said, shaking my hand with a grip that was firm but not trying to prove anything. "Frank's told me a lot about you folks." "All lies, I'm sure," I said, getting a laugh from Frank. Kyle turned to Carol and something shifted in the air. It was subtle, like the pressure change before a storm. He took her offered hand, held it maybe a beat too long. "Ma'am," he said. That slight drawl I'd later learn came from 3 years at Fort Campbell in Kentucky. "Carol," she said, "and please no ma'am, makes me feel like my mother." "Carol then," he said, and her name in his mouth sounded different somehow. Weightier. Ashley and Brandon had come out to see what the fuss was about. Kyle was good with them, asking Ashley about Purdue, talking to Brandon about football without condescension. He had that gift some people have of making whoever they're talking to feel like the most important person in the world. "You'll have to come to the Memorial Day barbecue Monday," Frank said. "Whole neighborhood'll be there. Good chance for Kyle to meet everyone at once. Get the awkwardness over with." "Wouldn't miss it," Carol said, though we'd actually been planning to skip it this year. Both of us burned out on forced social interaction. After they left, Carol was quiet, clearing dishes with unusual focus. "Seems nice," I said, fishing. "Who?" "Kyle, Frank's brother." "Oh, yes, nice." She went inside, leaving me on the deck with the strange feeling that something had just happened, but I couldn't identify what. The Memorial Day barbecue was exactly what you'd expect from the Andersons, excessive in every way. Professional catering pretending to be home cooking. A bartender mixing cocktails that no one at a barbecue actually wants, but everyone drinks to be polite. Patricia, holding court by the pool, dispensing real estate wisdom and gossip in equal measure. Kyle stood apart from it all, beer in hand but barely touched, positioned where he could see all the exits. It was fascinating to watch, the way his eyes tracked movement, how he cataloged each new arrival, the subtle tension in his shoulders that never quite released. PTSD, Jennifer Brennan whispered to me, proud of her armchair diagnosis. My cousin has it. They can't relax, always waiting for something bad to happen. But when Carol approached him with a plate of food, that tension melted. His shoulders dropped, his stance softened. He actually smiled. Not the polite smile he'd been wearing like armor, but something genuine. I watched them talk by the pool fence, too far away to hear, but close enough to see Carol touch her hair 3 times in 5 minutes. A nervous gesture I hadn't seen since our dating days. Kyle said something that made her laugh, really laugh, not the polite chuckle she usually deployed at neighborhood gatherings. They seem to be hitting it off, Patricia Anderson observed, appearing at my elbow with the stealth of a predator. Your wife and Kyle. Carol's good at making people feel welcome, I said. Patricia hummed, a sound that could mean anything. Kyle's fragile, you know. The war broke something in him. He needs stability, routine, not complications. Looking back, I wonder if Patricia knew even then. If she sensed something in the air between them, some chemical reaction that would eventually burn down multiple lives. Or maybe she was just protective of her brother-in-law, warning off potential drama the way she'd warn buyers about problem properties. The changes in Carol started small that summer. Little things that by themselves meant nothing but together formed a pattern I was too trusting or too stupid to see. First was the gym membership. We'd had a family membership to the Carmel Racquet Club for years, but suddenly Carol wanted something more intense. She joined a CrossFit gym, one of those industrial-looking places where people flip tires and climb ropes and post constantly about their WODs on social media. I need a challenge, she said when I expressed surprise. I'm 42, Richard. If I don't get in shape now, I never will. The clothes came next. Years of Ann Taylor and Talbots suddenly replaced by Lululemon and Athleta. Form-fitting workout clothes that she wore even when not working out. Her work wardrobe evolved too, still professional but sharper, more fitted, hemlines an inch higher, necklines an inch lower. You look amazing, I told her one morning in July and meant it. She did look amazing. You just noticed? She asked, and there was something in her tone I couldn't identify. Disappointment? Accusation? Testing? I always notice, I said, kissing her goodbye. Just don't always say it out loud. Maybe you should, she said, and left for work before I could respond. The hair transformation was gradual but dramatic. Carol had worn the same honey blonde, shoulder-length style for 15 years. Suddenly she was getting highlights, lowlights, something called balayage that cost $300 and looked essentially the same to me but made her check her reflection constantly. Midlife crisis? Ashley asked during a FaceTime call, seeing her mother's new look. Midlife awakening, Carol corrected, and Ashley and I exchanged glances through the screen. The book club shift should have been my first real red flag. For 5 years, Carol's book club had met Thursday nights, rotating between members' houses. They read literary fiction that won awards and made them feel cultured, drank wine that cost more than the books, and from what I could tell, spent maybe 10 minutes actually discussing the literature. In August, Carol announced the club was moving to Tuesdays. Jennifer's got a conflict with Thursdays now, she explained, though I'd seen Jennifer at Kroger that morning and she'd said nothing about any conflicts. Tuesday works better for everyone. Everyone except me, I joked. Tuesday's my basketball night. You haven't gone to basketball in 2 months, Carol pointed out, which was true but beside the point. Still, it's the principle. Well, principles don't read themselves, she said, kissing my cheek. You'll survive without me one night a week. The first Tuesday, she left at 6:30 wearing jeans and a nice top, carrying a bottle of wine and a copy of whatever Oprah had recommended that month. She came home at 10:30, slightly flushed, saying Jennifer's new house was too warm. The second Tuesday, she was gone until 11 o'clock. The third Tuesday, 11:30. By the fourth Tuesday, when she crawled into bed at midnight, freshly showered and smelling of unfamiliar soap, I finally asked, "Book club's running pretty late these days." "We got into a really intense discussion about themes," she said, her back to me. "You know how Jennifer gets when she's had wine?" I didn't, actually. Jennifer Brennan was a two-glass maximum kind of woman. Always driving. Always responsible. But I let it go because what else was I going to do? Accuse my wife of lying about book club? That was crazy. That was the kind of thing insecure husbands did. Controlling husbands. Husbands who didn't trust their wives. I trusted Carol. We'd built a life together, had children together, weathered her parents' deaths and my parents' deaths, and economic downturns and teenage rebellion and Brandon's broken arm and Ashley's eating disorder scare sophomore year. You don't go through all that and then suddenly throw it away for… what? What could possibly be worth destroying all of that? Kyle, apparently. Though I didn't know that yet. Wouldn't know it for sure until Bailey, our golden retriever, turned detective and brought me evidence I couldn't ignore. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The cologne incident happened in early September. Carol slid into bed on a Tuesday night, and I caught a whiff of something that definitely wasn't her usual perfume. It was masculine, expensive, the kind of scent that suggested European sports cars and watches that cost more than some people's annual salary. "Is that cologne?" I asked. She froze for just a second, then laughed. "God, yes. Tom Bradley at the bank. You remember Tom? He must bathe in that stuff. Aqua di Gio, I think. Had to sit next to him in a meeting today and I still can't get the smell out." Tom Bradley. I did remember Tom. 50-something. Divorced. Trying desperately to recapture his youth through excessive gym time and apparently excessive cologne. It made sense. It was reasonable. It was a perfectly logical explanation for why my wife smelled like another man. Except it happened again the next Tuesday. And the next. "Tom really needs an intervention," I joked the third time. "I know, right?" Carol said. But her laugh was too high, too quick. "I've started bringing a change of clothes to work." Bailey knew something was wrong before I did. That dog had been Carol's shadow since we brought him home as a puppy 7 years ago. He slept on her side of the bed, followed her from room to room, waited by the door when she was gone. But on Tuesday nights, he became anxious. He'd whine when she picked up her purse, pace by the front door, refused to eat his dinner. When she came home, he'd greet her with a frantic energy, usually reserved for when we returned from vacations, jumping and crying like she'd been gone for weeks instead of hours. "Silly dog," Carol would say, but she'd avoid his eyes when she said it. Work became my escape from the growing unease I couldn't name. I threw myself into quarterly projections, client dinners, mentoring junior sales reps. Anything to avoid being home on Tuesday nights, watching Carol get ready for book club, smelling that cologne when she returned. My sales numbers started slipping. For the first time in 5 years, I missed my quarterly target by 3%. Not catastrophic, but noticeable. "Everything okay at home?" Jeff asked. We'd been friends since I started at Midwest Industrial, one of those work friendships that could become real friendship if either of us had the time and energy to pursue it. "Yeah, everything's great," I said, and almost meant it. Carol's still looking amazing with that new workout routine. "She is," I said, and something in my tone must have been off because Jeff gave me a look. "You sure everything's okay?" I wanted to tell him. Wanted to say that my wife of 22 years was acting strange, that she smelled like cologne that wasn't mine, that our dog knew something I was too afraid to admit. But that would make it real, and I wasn't ready for real. "Everything's fine," I said. "Just tired." The garage incident in early October should have been when I stopped pretending everything was fine. It was a Tuesday, unseasonably warm, Indian summer holding on past its expiration date. I'd left work early with a headache, planning to take some ibuprofen and lie down before Carol got home. Her Lexus was in the garage. I sat in my Tahoe for 5 minutes, staring at her car like it might disappear if I looked hard enough. It was 2:30. She should have been at work. Even if she'd left early, she would have told me. We always told each other these things. It was part of the rhythm of marriage, the constant low-level communication that kept us synced. I went inside, called out her name. No answer. Checked every room, even the basement. Empty. Her purse wasn't on the kitchen counter where she always left it. Her work laptop wasn't in the office. But her car was definitely in the garage. That night at dinner, I mentioned it casually. Funny thing, I came home early today and saw your car in the garage. She didn't miss a beat. Oh, Jennifer picked me up for book club. You know, parking at her new place is a nightmare with all that construction on Meridian. Right, I said. The construction. There was no construction on Meridian near Jennifer's house. I drove by the next day to check. The Kroger receipt I found in her car 2 days later was time-stamped 7:47 p.m., right in the middle of when book club would have been happening. When I asked about it, so casually, just confused about the logistics, she had an instant explanation. I stopped before Jennifer picked me up. We needed wine and she asked me to grab some brie. Every lie came so quickly, so smoothly, like she'd rehearsed them. Or like she'd been telling them so often they'd become reflexive. I started paying attention after that. Not snooping. I told myself I wasn't snooping, just observing. Like a scientist studying a specimen that had started exhibiting unusual behavior. I noticed Kyle was never at neighborhood gatherings on Tuesday nights. When I mentioned it to Frank at a Saturday afternoon beer in the driveway session, he said Kyle had a PTSD support group that met Tuesdays. Good for him for getting help, Frank said. Too many of these guys try to tough it out alone. Not Kyle, though. Every Tuesday, regular as clockwork. I noticed Carol's phone, which used to lie face up on the counter while she cooked, now lived face down. The password had changed from our anniversary date to something I didn't know. Security update at work, she explained, when I couldn't unlock it to check the weather. They're making us use complex passwords for everything now. I noticed that when I mentioned Kyle had helped Patricia fix her car the previous weekend, Carol's hand jerked, sending coffee across our granite countertop. Clumsy, she muttered, grabbing paper towels. Kyle seems handy, I said, watching her closely. I guess, she said, scrubbing at the coffee like it had personally offended her. I don't really notice. That was when I knew for sure. Not suspected, not wondered, but knew. Because Carol noticed everything about everyone. She could tell you what the mailman's new girlfriend looked like based on a glimpse through a car window. She knew every piece of gossip in a 3-block radius. The idea that she hadn't noticed Kyle, who lived next door and radiated the kind of damaged intensity that made suburban women write bad poetry, was laughable. But I still didn't confront her. Some part of me believed that if I didn't acknowledge it, it would go away. Kyle would find his own place. Carol would get bored with whatever this was, and we'd go back to our regular programming of mortgage payments and college tuition and saving for retirement. Then Bailey brought me the dog tag. It was Thursday, October 15th, 7:43 p.m. I know the exact time because I just checked it, wondering if I should call it a night on the sales projections I'd been reviewing. Bailey was in the backyard, barking with the kind of excitement that meant he'd found something worth bringing inside. Usually a dead bird, or a particularly interesting stick. I opened the patio door and he bounded in, tail wagging furiously, something metallic glinting in his mouth. Drop it, I commanded, and he did, proudly depositing his treasure on the hardwood. It was a military dog tag on a broken chain. I picked it up, still warm and wet from Bailey's mouth, and read the stamped information in the kitchen light. Anderson, Kyle J. 326-4-4-9-875. Opus Pius Methodist. The chain wasn't worn through. It had been snapped, pulled apart with force. There were scratches on the metal, some definitely from Bailey's teeth, others older, like the tag had been scraped against something rough, or pulled off in a hurry, or torn away in passion. I stood in my kitchen holding another man's identification and felt my world tilt off its axis. Not because I was surprised. I'd known, really known, for weeks. But knowing and holding physical proof are different things. One you can deny, rationalize, ignore. The other sits in your hand, undeniable as gravity. I walked through the house like a detective at a crime scene, No windows open, no signs of entry, nothing disturbed except my entire understanding of my life. Bailey must have found it outside. I grabbed a flashlight and followed him to the backyard, where he led me straight to his favorite digging spot near the back fence. Our yard technically shared a property line with the Andersons, though their pool house created a natural barrier. What I'd never really considered was that Kyle's basement apartment had a door facing our yard. Not a direct line of sight, you'd have to go around the pool house, but close enough that something dropped there could end up here. Or someone leaving there in a hurry, pulling away from an embrace, might lose something that would travel the 15 feet to our property. I sat at my kitchen table with that dog tag for 2 hours, running through scenarios like sales projections. Each Tuesday night fitted into place like numbers in a spreadsheet. Carol's transformations, the cologne, Kyle's absence from neighborhood gatherings, the way they'd carefully avoided each other at the last few barbecues, a navigation so precise it had to be orchestrated. I pulled out my phone. Carol's contact photo smiling up at me, taken at Ashley's graduation last May, both of us beaming with parental pride. I typed out 5 different messages, deleted them all, then finally sent, "Honey, what do you think about inviting the Andersons for dinner Saturday? Frank, Patricia, and Kyle?" Her response came in less than 30 seconds. "Just Frank and Patricia, maybe?" Kyle makes me uncomfortable. All that intensity. There it was, the confirmation I didn't need but somehow required. She'd defended Kyle just last week when Susan Peterson had called him unstable at the Homeowners Association meeting. She'd spent hours organizing veteran support events, specifically because men like Kyle deserve our respect and assistance. She'd asked Frank detailed questions about Kyle's service, his medals, his experiences. But now he made her uncomfortable. I could have confronted her that night. Could have waited in our bedroom with the dog tag like some noir film scene, watched her face crumble as she walked in. Could have done it privately, quietly, the way civilized people implode their marriages. But 22 years of marriage teaches you exactly how someone will react when cornered. Carol would cry. The tears that had worked on me since college. She'd deny at first, then partially admit, then beg for understanding. She'd want counseling, therapy, a chance to explain how I'd been distant, how she'd been lonely, how it just happened. She'd trickle-truth me for months, each revelation framed as the final confession until the next detail emerged. We'd either divorce quietly to protect the children or stay together in a hollow pantomime of marriage, every neighborhood gathering an exercise and pretending, every Tuesday night a fresh wound. Neither option appealed to me. Friday morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. My voice was steady when I told Jeff I needed him to cover the Morrison Industries meeting. "You sound fine," he said, suspicious. 24-hour thing, I lied. Don't want to risk getting the client sick. I drove my Tahoe to the office and parked in my usual spot where the security cameras would confirm my presence, then walked 3 blocks to the Enterprise rental and got a Honda Accord, the kind of anonymous sedan that disappears in suburban traffic. By 11:30, I was parked across from Fifth Third Bank's main branch, watching the employee exit. Carol emerged at 12:07, checking her phone as she walked. She'd texted me that morning about having lunch with the girls from accounting, even asked if I wanted her to grab me something from Panera. I followed 3 cars behind as she drove not toward Panera, but to the Hilton Garden Inn off Meridian, the kind of place business travelers stayed when they didn't have the budget for downtown. Kyle's black Dodge Charger was already in the parking lot, backed into a space with a clear view of all approaches. Those military habits. Always see what's coming. Always have an exit strategy. Carol parked 4 rows away, checked her mirrors twice, then walked into the hotel with her head down like that would make her invisible to the universe. I sat in that rental car for 2 hours and 13 minutes. Business travelers came and went, pulling roller bags and talking on phones. A wedding party checked in, all matching t-shirts that said Brennan's Last Stand and trailing luggage and laughter. At 1:47, Kyle emerged first, scanning the parking lot with the kind of thoroughness that would have spotted me if I'd been any closer. At 2:03, Carol followed. Her hair was different than this morning, mussed and restyled, her lipstick fresh. Her walk quick but unsteady, like her legs weren't quite working right. She texted me from her car. Still at Panera with the girls? This new salad is amazing, I responded. Enjoy lunch, honey. That emoji, that little kissing face she sent while she was still in the parking lot of the hotel where she'd just spent 2 hours with another man. The casual cruelty of it, the assumption that I was too stupid or too trusting to know what she was doing. That evening was surreal in its normalcy. Carol made pot roast, my favorite, the house filling with the smell of comfort food. Brandon talked about tomorrow's football game. They were playing Center Grove, their biggest rival. Ashley FaceTimed from Purdue, excited about parents' weekend coming up, asking if we'd take her and her roommates to dinner. Of course, sweetheart, Carol said, the devoted mother. Where do you want to go? They discussed restaurants while I sat there with the dog tag in my pocket, its weight redistributing every time I shifted. Brandon asked if I was feeling better, and I told him I was feeling more myself than I had in months. You coming to the game tomorrow? He asked. Wouldn't miss it, I said. In fact, I volunteered to help Mr. Anderson with the Booster Club barbecue. Carol's fork paused halfway to her mouth. You volunteered? You hate those things. Time I got more involved in the community, I said, meeting her eyes. Neighbors supporting neighbors, right? Right, she said slowly. That's great. Frank could use the help. Kyle too, probably. I'm sure he'll be there. Oh, Carol said, setting down her fork. Will he? Why wouldn't he be? It's his nephew's team. I just thought, with his PTSD and crowds, he seems to do fine at Frank's parties, I observed. All those people. Those are different, Carol said quickly. Controlled environments. A high school parking lot is pretty controlled. I guess, she said, pushing her pot roast around her plate. I just worry about him. All those veterans coming back damaged. Funny, I said. Last month you were organizing fundraisers for them. That's different. How? She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw the calculation in her eyes. How much did I know? How much was I guessing? How much could she safely deny? It just is, she said finally, and we finished dinner in silence. Saturday arrived with perfect fall weather. Clear skies, 65 degrees, the kind of day that makes Indiana almost forgive you for surviving its winters. The Carmel High parking lot was already filling by 5:30 for the 7 o'clock kickoff. The Booster Club had outdone themselves. 3 professional-grade grills, tables groaning with sides, enough coolers to stock a small convenience store. Frank Anderson and I worked side by side at the main grill, him holding forth about the dealership business, while I nodded and flipped burgers with the focus of a surgeon. Kyle should be here soon, he said, checking his phone. Told him we needed an extra pair of hands. Great, I said, and meant it. Kyle arrived at 5:47, parking his Charger away from the family vehicles in a spot that allowed quick exit. Always the soldier, even at a high school football game. His Army t-shirt was black, tight across a chest built by combat and maintained by discipline. Against the fabric, his remaining dog tag caught the light. Just one, where there should have been 2. Carol arrived with Patricia Anderson and Jennifer Morrison at 5:52, the 3 of them laughing at something on Jennifer's phone. She navigated the crowd with practiced precision, maintaining a careful distance from Kyle that was so studied it might as well have been a neon sign. When she kissed my cheek and asked if I needed help, her lips were cold despite the warm evening. I'm good, I said. Why don't you check on the dessert table? She practically sprinted away when Kyle approached for a burger. By 6:15, the tailgate was in full swing. The Petersons had surprised everyone by showing up, Mrs. Peterson clutching Mr. Peterson's arm as they navigated the crowd with the careful steps of people who knew their bones wouldn't forgive a fall. The Brennan's twins were wearing matching Greyhounds jerseys that would be stained beyond rescue within the hour. Father Timothy from St. Luke's was holding court near the drinks, blessing the team's chances with one hand while holding a beer in the other. This was Carmel in all its suburban glory. Successful people who'd made careful choices, living careful lives, raising careful children who would repeat the cycle. Every marriage here had its secret tensions, every family its unspoken dramas, but they were supposed to stay unspoken. That was the deal. That was what separated us from the people who appeared on reality TV or Dr. Phil or those true crime documentaries where neighbors always said, "We never saw it coming." I was about to break that deal. Shatter it, really? Take a sledgehammer to the careful social construction we'd all agreed to maintain. At 6:17, I walked directly to Kyle, who was standing with three other veterans from the neighborhood. He was mid-story about something, his hands moving as he talked, the remaining dog tag bouncing against his chest with each gesture. "Kyle," I said, loud enough that conversations around us paused. "Good to see you." "Hey, Richard." His expression was friendly but puzzled when I didn't move on, just stood there, too close for casual conversation. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the dog tag, letting it dangle from my fingers where it caught the setting sun like a signal mirror. "This yours?" The transformation in his face was instant and devastating. I watched him cycle through surprise, fear, calculation, and attempted casualness in the span of 2 heartbeats. His fellow veterans stepped back slightly, sensing danger the way military men do. "Yeah, must have lost it." His hand reached for it, but I pulled it back slightly. "Where'd you find it?" "Funny thing," I said, my voice carrying now, Frank turning from his conversation with Principal Martinez. "Bailey brought it into our house, into our bedroom, actually." I put specific emphasis on our and bedroom, watching the words land like artillery shells. Patricia Anderson was approaching now, her radar for drama finely tuned after years of real estate negotiations gone wrong. "What's happening?" she asked, looking between Kyle and me. But I'd already turned away from Kyle, my eyes finding Carol across the tailgate area. She was frozen by the dessert table, her face the color of ash, a brownie halfway to her mouth like she'd been paused mid-scene. "Honey," I called out, my voice somehow steady and clear. "Come here. Look what Bailey found." Every conversation in the tailgate area stopped. 60-something successful suburban adults, sensing blood in the water like sharks at a country club pool party. Carol's walkover took forever, and no time at all, each step measured like she was approaching a gallows. "Isn't this strange?" I asked, holding up the dog tag so it spun slowly, catching light with each rotation. "Kyle's dog tag in our house?" The silence was so complete I could hear the marching band warming up in the distance, the squeak of someone's styrofoam cooler lid, a child asking their parent why everyone stopped talking. I walked past Carol, past Kyle, straight to Patricia Anderson. I placed the dog tag in her manicured hand with the kind of ceremony usually reserved for military funerals or wedding rings. "Patricia," I said clearly, "you should keep better track of your house guests." This was in my bedroom. The last 2 words detonated like a bomb in church. Patricia looked at the tag, then at Kyle, then at Carol. The math was simple enough that even someone who'd coasted on looks since 1998 could solve it. Her face went through its own transformation. Confusion, realization, rage. Frank stepped forward, his salesman's smile completely gone. "What exactly are you implying, Richard?" "I'm not implying anything, Frank," I said, my voice calm as a lake before a storm. "Just returning property. Though you might want to ask Kyle why his dog tag was in my bed, and Carol why she knows." The sound that came out of Carol's throat was somewhere between a gasp and a sob. "Richard, please, not here." And there it was. In 3 words, she'd confirmed everything. Not a denial, not outrage at false accusations, just a plea for different timing. Jennifer Morrison actually stepped backward, like adultery was contagious. Susan Walsh's hand flew to her mouth. The book club women exchanged looks of sudden understanding, all those Tuesday nights suddenly making terrible sense. Carol looked to Kyle for help, and that look was another confession, written in desperation, and witnessed by everyone who mattered in her social universe. Kyle took an instinctive step toward her, protective, possessive, completely forgetting where he was and who was watching. It was the movement of a man who'd grown used to comforting this woman, who'd held her enough times that the muscle memory overrode his tactical assessment. Frank saw it all. You son of a... Frank's fist connected with Kyle's jaw before the profanity finished. My brother? In my house? Kyle, trained soldier, combat veteran, didn't fight back. He took the hit, stumbled, but didn't fall, and made no move to defend himself when Frank wound up for another swing. Tom Morrison and David Walsh grabbed Frank's arms, holding him back while he struggled against them. 20 years, Frank screamed at Kyle. 20 years I've had your back. Let you live in my home. And you're screwing my neighbor's wife in my basement? Patricia had found her voice now, and it was sharp enough to cut glass. She turned on Carol with the fury of a woman who just realized she'd been made a fool in her own social circle. You pathetic... The word she used next wasn't fit for polite company, but no one was polite anymore. In my house? While I'm upstairs? While I'm making you coffee and asking about your day? Father Timothy tried to intercede, hands raised in a calming gesture. Please, let's all just... Don't you dare, Patricia whirled on him. Don't you dare try to make this civilized. This isn't civilized. This is... She gestured wildly at Carol and Kyle. This is animals. This is trash. The Petersons were already hobbling toward their car, Mr. Peterson moving faster than he had in years. The Brennans were hustling their twins away, though both children were straining to see what was happening, already composing the stories they'd tell at school Monday. Principal Martinez was on his phone, probably calling security, definitely wishing he'd stayed home. Through it all, I stood perfectly still, the eye of calm in this hurricane of suburban destruction. This was what I'd wanted. Not the private tears and negotiated settlements, but the raw public immolation of the lie we'd all been living. Brandon appeared at my elbow, his face pale. Dad, what's happening? I put my hand on his shoulder, steady and firm. Your mother made choices. We'll talk at home. His phone was buzzing. Ashley, who'd apparently been pocket-dialed and heard everything. I could hear her voice, tiny and confused, asking what was going on. Come on, I said to Brandon, loud enough for Carol to hear. Let's go. We walked away from the chaos, away from Carol sobbing while Jennifer Morrison stood frozen, unsure whether to comfort her former friend or maintain safe social distance. Away from Frank still screaming at Kyle, who stood there taking it like penance. Away from Patricia shrieking about betrayal while the entire population of Carmel's successful suburban set watched and recorded on their phones. The walk to the Tahoe felt both eternal and instant. Brandon climbed in silently, Ashley still on his phone. I could hear her crying now, confused and scared. I took the phone as I started the engine. Ashley, honey, it's Dad. What happened? What's going on? I heard screaming and... Your mother had an affair with Kyle Anderson. I found proof and confronted them publicly. We're going home now. The brutal honesty seemed to steady her. She was my daughter, after all. She preferred truth to comfortable lies. Is Mom? She's still at the tailgate. She won't be coming home tonight. I'm booking a flight, she said immediately. I can be there in the morning. Okay, sweetheart. Brandon and I will pick you up. The drive home was silent except for the buzz of phones. The family group chat was exploding with messages from Carol, but I'd already blocked her number. Brandon did the same without being asked. The social media storm was already beginning. By the time we pulled into our garage, there were 3 videos of the confrontation circulating on Facebook. We entered the house like soldiers securing a position. Bailey greeted us with confusion, looking for Carol, whining when he couldn't find her. I went straight to the bedroom, our bedroom, my bedroom now, and began the systematic removal of Carol's presence. Brandon appeared in the doorway with a roll of garbage bags. Where do you want her stuff? Garage, I said. Neatly. We're not animals. Unlike some people, I didn't say, but we both heard. We worked in efficient silence, 2 generations of Hayes men dealing with betrayal through action. Her clothes went into bags, organized by type because even in anger we maintained order. Her jewelry box, the one I'd given her for our 10th anniversary, went into a banker's box. The photos stayed on the walls for now. Those were family memories, not just hers to claim. By the time we'd finished, it was past 10. I called a locksmith who advertised 24-hour service, agreeing to his emergency rates without negotiation. Brandon and I ate pizza in the living room, while the man changed every lock in the house, Bailey finally settling at my feet with a resigned sigh. At 11:07, Carol tried her key in the front door. When it didn't work, she knocked. When we didn't answer, she began pounding. "Richard, please, let me explain." Brandon looked at me, waiting for guidance. I shook my head slightly, and he understood. We sat there, eating pizza and listening to her plead. "I know you're in there. I can see the lights. Brandon, honey, please." Brandon's jaw tightened at that. The attempt to use him, to make him complicit in opening the door. He picked up the remote and turned up the volume on the TV. Sports Center, talking about tomorrow's Colts game. Patricia Anderson's voice joined Carol's soon after. She'd apparently driven Carol home. "Richard Hayes, you son of a bitch. You destroyed my family. Open this door." That was rich. I destroyed her family. As if Kyle hadn't been the one in my bed. As if Carol hadn't been the one sneaking to hotels on Tuesday afternoons. When Frank's truck pulled up, I knew it was time to go. I couldn't have Frank arrested. He lived there. But I could leave. "Pack a bag," I told Brandon. "We're going to Ashley's dorm for the night." "What about Bailey?" "He comes too." We left through the garage as Frank pounded on the front door, his voice carrying threats about what he'd do if Kyle ever showed his face again. Carol was sobbing in the driveway, Patricia screaming at her, using words that would make their way into the divorce testimony. The neighbors were watching from windows, porch lights clicking on one by one like dominoes of curiosity. The drive to Purdue took 90 minutes through dark Indiana farmland. Brandon finally broke somewhere near Lafayette, the words coming out in a rush. "How long?" "I don't know exactly. Months, probably." "Are you and Mom getting divorced?" "Yes." "Good." The simplicity of it, the loyalty, made my throat tight. This was my son, choosing sides without hesitation, understanding betrayal in the black and white way that teenagers can before life teaches them about gray areas. "I'm sorry you had to see that," I said. "I'm not," he said. "Everyone should know what she did." Ashley was waiting outside her dorm, puffy-eyed but composed. She hugged Brandon first, then me, holding on longer than she had since middle school. "I got you a hotel room," she said. "My roommate's gone for the weekend, so Brandon can have her bed." "That's my girl," I said, and meant it in ways that had nothing to do with hotel arrangements. We spent the night in Ashley's dorm room anyway, all three of us plus Bailey, violating probably a dozen university policies. Ashley and Brandon on the twin beds, me on the floor with Bailey, all of us awake but pretending to sleep, processing what had just happened to our family. "Dad?" Ashley whispered around 2 a.m. "Yeah? Did you know? Before tonight?" "I suspected. Bailey found the dog tag a few days ago." "You planned it," Brandon said. "Not a question?" "Yes." "Good," Ashley said. "She deserved it." By morning, the story had evolved from local scandal to regional entertainment. Someone had compiled the various videos into a comprehensive narrative, complete with helpful captions identifying the players. "Suburban Wife's Affair, exposed at high school football game," was trending on Reddit. The Carmel Facebook groups were in meltdown, moderators working overtime to delete the most vicious comments while leaving enough to keep the discussion going. Frank was waiting on my porch when we returned Sunday morning, looking like he'd aged 5 years overnight. He stood when we pulled in, hands visible, no aggression in his posture. "Kyle's gone," he said without preamble. "Gave him 1 hour to pack. He's dead to me." He held out Carol's wedding ring and car keys. "She came back for these last night. Told her if she stepped foot on my property again, I'd have her arrested." "Frank, I'm sorry about—" "Don't." He held up a hand. "You did what you had to do. I would have done the same, maybe worse. Patricia's leaving me, you know? Says she can't stay in a house where that happened." We shook hands. Two middle-aged men suddenly alone in houses too big for one person, united by the strangest of circumstances. "For what it's worth," Frank said, "I had no idea. If I'd known—" He shrugged. Brothers are supposed to have each other's backs, not stab each other in the back. Monday morning came with brutal efficiency. I sat in the office of James Crawford, the divorce attorney everyone whispered about at country club gatherings, the one you hired when you wanted blood. Indiana's a no-fault state, he explained, reviewing my documentation. But adultery affects the settlement. The house is yours. Your inheritance for the down payment keeps it separate property. She'll get half the retirement accounts, but we can argue for less given the circumstances. What about the kids? Both over 16. They can choose. From what you've told me, that's not going to be a problem. Carol had already been placed on administrative leave from Fifth Third Bank. Turns out their employment contract had a moral Turks clause, archaic language from the 1950s that essentially meant don't embarrass the bank. The videos of Patricia calling her words, "I won't repeat here," were embarrassment enough. Kyle's situation was worse. Frank had contacted Kyle's former commanding officer, a golf buddy from Meridian Hills. Turns out the military takes a dim view of veterans who seduce the wives of the families hosting them. The dishonorable discharge proceedings would begin within the week, stripping him of benefits he'd earned with blood in Afghanistan. The text messages started Tuesday morning while I was trying to focus on quarterly reports. Can we please talk? I'm staying at the extended stay in Fishers. Room 237. Please, Richard. 22 years. I deleted it without responding. I know you hate me. I hate myself, but please let me explain. Not to save us. I know that's over. But because you deserve to know why. Delete. Brandon won't answer my calls. Ashley blocked me. Please just let me see my children. I forwarded that one to my lawyer with a note. Please handle. Wednesday, she showed up at my office. Security called up, professionally neutral. Mr. Hayes, there's a Carol Hayes here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment. She's not authorized for this building, I said. Please have her removed. Yes, sir. I watched from my window as security escorted her out, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Jeff appeared in my doorway minutes later. You okay? Getting there, I said, and for the first time, meant it. For what it's worth, Jeff said, everyone here thinks you did the right thing. Maybe not the way you did it, but she had it coming, he finished. 22 years and she throws it away for some damaged veteran? That's cold. The narrative was already forming, the story already being written by everyone except the people who'd lived it. Carol as the villain, me as the victim, Kyle as the opportunist. Simple roles for a complex situation. The truth was messier. The truth was that marriages don't end in parking lots. They end in 1,000 small moments before that. The truth was that I'd been a workaholic who assumed presence was the same as partnership. The truth was that Carol had been lonely in ways I hadn't noticed or hadn't wanted to notice. The truth was that Kyle had been broken in ways that made him seek comfort in the wrong places. But nobody wanted messy truth. They wanted clear villains and heroes, simple causation, moral certainty. So that's what I gave them, a public spectacle that removed all ambiguity. The divorce was finalized in a record time, 90 days from filing to decree. Carol didn't contest anything, probably on her lawyer's advice. She knew how it would look in court, the judge watching that video. The entire town already convicted her. She got 40% of the retirement accounts and her car. I got everything else, the house, the bulk of our savings, and most importantly, the kids. Neither Brandon nor Ashley would see her. She sent letters, cards, gifts, all returned unopened. She showed up at Ashley's sorority formal, but Ashley walked past her like she was furniture. She tried attending Brandon's last football game of the season, but left when the entire student section started chanting something cruel about Tuesday nights. The house felt wrong with her ghost in every corner. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., reach for her, find cold sheets, and remember. Bailey would sit by the front door some evenings, waiting for someone who wasn't coming home. Brandon started seeing a therapist after his grades dropped. Ashley changed her major from business to engineering, anything that didn't remind her of her mother's career path. 3 months after the divorce, I put the house on the market. It sold in a weekend to a couple from California who'd never heard of the tailgate incident, as it had become known in Carmel social circles. I bought a condo downtown, modern and minimal, with no room for ghosts. Frank and Patricia's divorce was uglier than mine. She got half the dealerships in the settlement, which she immediately sold to competitors, flooding the market with Anderson inventory. Frank started drinking too much, showing up at the country club bar at noon, telling anyone who'd listen about his brother's betrayal. Kyle disappeared entirely. Some said Alaska, working on fishing boats. Others said overseas, contracting for companies that didn't care about discharge status. One rumor had him in Wyoming, working on a ranch, trying to find peace in physical labor and empty horizons. His name became shorthand in certain circles for a specific type of betrayal. Don't pull a Kyle meant don't destroy the people helping you. Don't mistake kindness for weakness. Don't let your damage others. The Anderson house stood empty for almost a year. Bad karma, the realtors said. Eventually, it sold at a significant loss to developers who tore it down and built two smaller houses on the lot, erasing that property from the street's memory. But memories don't need houses to live in. They live in the way Jennifer Morrison still can't look me in the eye at Kroger. They live in the way the book club disbanded, its members unable to pretend Tuesday nights were about literature anymore. They live in the way Patricia Anderson mentions that night in every real estate showing. Full disclosure, this is 3 blocks from where the tailgate incident happened. 6 months after the divorce, I ran into Carol at St. Elmo's Steakhouse. I was having dinner with a client when she walked in with someone. A man I didn't recognize, older, trying too hard with his hair plugs and aggressive tan. She saw me, froze, then whispered something to her date. They left without being seated. The waiter, who'd seen the whole thing, refilled my wine without being asked. On the house, he said quietly. Saw the video. My ex did the same thing, just without the military angle. Different kind of war, I said. Still casualties, though, he replied. A year after everything, Brandon gave a presentation at Purdue's engineering showcase. He'd followed Ashley there, though into a different program. I sat in the audience, Ashley beside me, watching my son explain structural load calculations with the kind of precision I'd once applied to sales projections. When he finished, his eyes found mine in the crowd. The nod between us was small but significant, an acknowledgement that we'd survived our family's structural failure and rebuilt something smaller but stronger. He's good, said the woman sitting next to me, a professor according to her badge. He's had to learn about structural integrity the hard way, I said. She gave me a curious look but didn't press. The story was out there if she wanted to find it. A Google search of my name would bring up the videos, the Reddit threads, the think pieces about public shaming in the digital age. 2 years have passed now since Bailey brought me that dog tag. He's older now, gray around his muzzle, moving slower. Sometimes I catch him looking at the front door around 6:30 on Tuesdays, some part of him still expecting Carol to leave for book club. But the memory fades a little more each week, replaced by newer routines, safer patterns. Carol still lives in Indiana, last I heard. Still works at a credit union in Greenwood for half what she made at Fifth Third. Still alone. The tailgate incident video has a way of surfacing whenever someone Googles her name. She sends Christmas cards to my office since she doesn't have my home address. I throw them away unopened, but I notice she still signs them Carol Hayes. She kept my name, either from habit or hope, or just because starting over completely requires more energy than she has left. Brandon graduates next year, already fielding job offers from engineering firms that don't care about his family drama, only his ability to calculate load-bearing capacities. Ashley's working in Boston now, defense contracting with Raytheon, using her security clearance to build a career in rooms her mother could never enter. They both have good relationships now. Brandon with a pre-med student who jokes that she'll be able to treat the family trauma professionally. Ashley with an attorney who finds the whole story fascinating from a legal perspective. They've learned to trust but verify, to love but maintain escape routes. Perhaps that's my true legacy to them. Not the public destruction of their mother, but the lesson that sometimes the only way forward is through complete demolition. I date occasionally, nothing serious. There's a marketing director at a competing firm who understands why I flinch when someone suggests Tuesday plans. a divorce teacher who doesn't ask why I insist on complete transparency about whereabouts, a widow who appreciates that some losses are too fundamental to fully heal, but nothing permanent. Trust, once shattered that completely, doesn't rebuild to the same specifications. The dog tag still sits in my desk drawer at the office, tucked behind business cards and paper clips. Sometimes I take it out, run my thumb over Kyle's name and service number, feel the weight of everything that small piece of metal represents. The war he survived overseas. The war he started at home. The war I finished in a high school parking lot with 60 witnesses and countless camera phones. I could throw it away. Should, probably. But I keep it as a reminder that sometimes the smallest things, a piece of metal no bigger than a credit card, can bring down entire structures. That Tuesday nights aren't always what they seem. That golden retrievers make excellent detectives. That 22 years can end with a single drop it command. People still debate, in certain Carmel circles, whether I went too far, whether I should have handled it privately, preserved the dignity that separates successful suburbs from trailer parks and reality TV. They whisper about it at country club gatherings, use it as a cautionary tale at marriage counseling sessions, cite it in divorce proceedings as an example of what not to do. But here's what they don't understand. I didn't destroy my marriage at that tailgate. Carol did, one Tuesday at a time, one lie at a time, one hotel room at a time. I just chose the time and place for the funeral, made sure everyone who mattered could attend, turned private betrayal into public record so there could be no rehabilitation, no eventual forgetting, no quiet return to respectability. 3 years have now passed, and I've learned something about public destruction. It's not just about revenge or justice. It's about prevention. Every married couple in Carmel now knows the story. Every spouse having an affair thinks about that video, wonders if their partner might be planning something similar. Every person considering betrayal remembers Carol's face in that parking lot. Mascara running, life ruined, everything exposed. I've become a cautionary tale myself. The man who went nuclear, who chose scorched earth over quiet dignity. Some admire it, call it strength. Others see it as cruelty, unnecessary brutality. But they all remember it. They all think twice. Brandon called last week from Purdue. He'd been elected president of his engineering society, was thinking about graduate school, maybe MIT or Stanford. That's amazing, I told him. Your mother would be... I stopped, habit breaking against reality. It's okay, Dad, he said. You can mention her. She existed. She would be proud, I finished. Maybe, Brandon said. But I don't really care what she would be. I care what you are. I'm proud, I said. So proud. That's what matters, he said, and I could hear him becoming the man he was meant to be, shaped by trauma but not defined by it. Ashley sends pictures from Boston, her apartment overlooking the harbor, her team at Raytheon, the marathon medal she earned last month. She's building a life 3 states away from the scene of our family's destruction. But she calls every Sunday night, our new tradition born from the ashes of old ones. I saw Mom, she said during last week's call. My stomach clenched. Where? LinkedIn. She viewed my profile. Didn't message or anything, just looked. How do you feel about that? Like she's a stranger who used to know me, Ashley said. Is that wrong? No, I said. That's exactly what she is. The truth is, I think about Carol sometimes. Not with longing or anger anymore, just curiosity. What does she think about on Tuesday nights? Does she remember the book club lie when she sees women carrying wine bottles? Does Kyle ever contact her? 2 people who destroyed everything for an affair that couldn't survive its exposure? But mostly, I don't think about her at all. She's become what she chose to be. A cautionary tale, a whispered warning, a reminder that some betrayals are too fundamental to forgive. Last month, I was at a new client dinner when one of their executives, a few drinks in, said, "Hey, aren't you the guy from that video, the dog tag thing?" The table went silent. I am, I said simply. That was brutal, he said, but honest, respectfully honest. It was necessary, I said. My wife made me watch it, another executive chimed in. Said it was a reminder that secrets don't stay secret. Smart woman, I said, and we moved on to talking about supply chain logistics. But later, as I drove home to my downtown condo, I thought about how that video had become bigger than our story. It had become a cultural moment, a reference point, a modern parable about betrayal and consequences. Bailey's getting older now, sleeping more, playing less. The vet says he has maybe another year. When he goes, the last witness to the truth will be gone. The only one who knows exactly where that dog tag was found, exactly how it got there, exactly what secret his backyard digging uncovered. But his work was done the moment he dropped that tag at my feet. He gave me the evidence I needed, the excuse for the confrontation I'd been planning since I'd followed Carol to that hotel. He was the catalyst that turned suspicion into action, private knowledge into public reckoning. Sometimes I drive past Sycamore Street, though there's no reason to. The neighborhood has turned over almost completely. The Petersons moved to assisted living. The Brennans relocated to Zionsville. The Anderson house is gone, replaced by those two modern farmhouses that look nothing like the original. But every time I drive past, I slow down near where our driveway used to be, and I think about the life we built there. 22 years of mortgage payments and birthday parties and Christmas mornings. All of it real, until it wasn't. The new owners have young children. I can see the swing set in the backyard, the bikes in the driveway. They're building their own dreams in that house, unaware of the ghosts that once lived there. And that's as it should be. Every house has a history. Not every history needs to be remembered. But ours will be remembered, at least in Carmel, at least for a generation. The tailgate incident has become local legend, the kind of story that gets passed down and embellished, though it hardly needs embellishment. The truth was dramatic enough. I keep thinking about something Frank said when I ran into him at a Pacers game last month. We nodded at each other across the concourse, two men who shared a specific kind of loss. At halftime, he found me at the concession stand. "You know what the worst part is," he said without preamble. "What?" I still don't understand why. Kyle had everything in my house. Free room, free food, family who loved him. Why risk all that for another man's wife? "Because damaged people do damage things," I said. "Is that from therapy?" "That's from experience." He laughed, bitter but not unkind. "Patricia's remarried, you know. Some pharmaceutical executive. Big house in Geist. Acts like I never existed." "Carol's still alone," I offered, not sure why. "Good," Frank said. "Kyle too, far as I know. Some sins don't deserve second chances." "What about us?" I asked. "Do we deserve second chances?" Frank thought about it. "We didn't sin. We just trusted the wrong people. That's not a sin, that's a mistake. Mistakes you learn from, sins you pay for." "And they're paying?" "Every day," Frank said. "Every single day." He was right. The payment never stops for public shame. In the digital age, disgrace is forever. The video will always exist, somewhere on someone's phone, ready to surface whenever Carol tries to move forward. Every job interview, every potential relationship, every attempt at redemption will crash against that 2-minute clip of her life falling apart in a high school parking lot. I've thought about whether I regret making it so public. Late at night, when Bailey's snoring and the city lights twinkle below my condo windows, I examine my choices with the kind of honesty that only comes in darkness. The answer is always no. Not because I'm cruel or vindictive, though I was both in that moment, but because private destruction allows for private rehabilitation. Carol could have spun a story about growing apart, about mutual decisions, about conscious uncoupling, or whatever terminology people use to sanitize betrayal. She could have kept her job, her reputation, her social standing. She could have remarried eventually, probably to someone better than the desperate man with hair plugs I saw her with at St. Elmo's. But that would have been another lie, and our marriage had ended because of lies. The truth deserved witnesses. The betrayal deserved consequences. The 22 years we'd built deserved a proper funeral, not a quiet burial. So I gave it one, complete with witnesses, documentation, and video evidence that will outlive us all. The Hayes family still exists, just reconfigured. smaller but stronger, like a bone that breaks, and he